Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to M&M Missing and Murdered for 9/12/2014 with the words we all want to hear, "I'm coming home." We are experiencing some technical difficulties, so if you hear some strange noises or things, please forgive us, but we're doing our best to get through there. M&M Missing and Murdered deals with not only the missing or helping to find justice for those that have been murdered, but we also work to help those who have been bullied, who might be perhaps caught up in human trafficking or child protective services, or in anything concerning anything along that line. We're more than willing to help with. We can be reached at our two Facebook pages for M&M Missing and Murdered 1 and 2, and also our personal Facebook page, which is Jenny Jerry Boone. We can also be reached through M&M Group Mail at gmail.com. We would like to invite anyone who would like to, if you want to present questions or anything to our guests this evening, you can do that by calling 646-595-4561, and you can also use that number to get through to the chat room, I believe. As always, to start our evening off, we want to look at some of our M&M angels, and we have 3 of them this evening. I'd like to start with Benjamin Adams, who is missing from Bolivar, Missouri, and he's only been missing since 9/11/14. Benjamin is 4 years old, and he disappeared after his grandmother was awarded custody of him on Thursday. He is a white male, age 4, approximately 3 feet 1 inches tall, 44 pounds, blonde hair, blue eyes, with fair complexion. The suspect is Timothy D. Lormand, who is also a white male, age 36. His height is 6 feet 1 inches tall and 165 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes, wearing a long-sleeve button shirt and blue jeans. He has a history of abusing Benjamin. Lorman may be driving a silver 1993 Buick LeSabre or a dark green 2014 Ford Explorer, but the registrations are unknown, so we don't have tag numbers for him. He may be heading to Steamboat Springs, Colorado. So if you know anything about the whereabouts of 4-year-old Benjamin Adams, we're asking anyone to call the Polk County Sheriff's Office at 417-777-9021, or you can contact us through M&M Group Mail, and we'll see that the information gets passed on to the authorities. Second, this evening, I want to look at a 2-year-old by the name of Colton Brant Turner. Colton was 2 years old. He's a Texas boy, and he may be an abuse victim. The police in Cedar Park, Texas, and the FBI are investigating the disappearance of Colton. Police say that on 9/10/2014 at around 6:20 p.m., they received a report of a welfare concern of a child believed to be a victim of child abuse. Okay. Detectives said the person who called police saw pictures that the boy's father had posted on Facebook, showing him with cuts and bruises. Turner's father said the last time he had seen his son was May 30th, 2014. Officers were able to locate the child's mother, but not the child. Detectives were unable to verify that the child was last seen by police other than the child's mother around July 2014. Police believe the child is in immediate danger. Police are also saying that at this time, the mother is providing inconsistent details about the whereabouts of the child and the circumstances surrounding his disappearance. Work, which is the mother, told investigators she last saw Turner in July. Records show that Work has a criminal history and that she pleaded guilty in May of 2013 to assault causing bodily injury. She has also been arrested in 2012 for cruelty to livestock animals. Work also has a history with Child Protective Services. Colton is 3 feet tall, 30 pounds, with blonde hair and green eyes. Colton was last known to be wearing an orange tank top with a picture of a surfboard, and it said "Surf's Up" on the front, and he was wearing green pajama pants. He may have a black and purple blanket. Anyone with any information as to the whereabouts of Colton, please contact the Cedar Park Police Department at 512-260-4600, or if you want to pass the information on to us, we'll make sure it gets to the authorities. And finally, this evening, I want to look at Kara Nancy Nichols. Kara went missing on October 9th, 2012. At that time, she was 19. Today, she would be 21. Her birthday is May 20th, 1993. She is a female, average built of 5'6", weighed about 115 pounds. She is a Caucasian with green eyes and bleached blonde, sometimes with streaks in her hair. She has a small tattoo of a spaceman on her left wrist and a small tattoo of a leaf her left ankle. Kara left her home, which was in the 6700 block of Mission Road in Colorado Springs, bound for Denver on October 9th, 2012. The last call on her cell phone was at 11:45 p.m. on October 9th, 2012. Kara has not been seen or heard from since. Kara also has gauged ears, and she also has piercings in her upper lip and navel. It was reported that she was on her way to Denver for a photo shoot with some other models, and that she hasn't been seen since that time. If you have any information on this case or the whereabouts of Kara, please call the detectives at area code 719-390-5555. And again, if you have information and you want to pass it along, we can send it to us at mnmgroupmail@gmail.com, and we'll make sure that it gets passed along anonymously if that's the way you would like for it to be done. Those are our angels for this evening. We have one other angel, and that's my angel Jenny, and today happens to be her birthday. But we're going to turn it over to her. She's 25 again. We're going to turn it over to her, and she's going to get us started on the program this evening. Jenny?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Jerry. I'd like to bring on Kelly Cordelius. Welcome to our show, Kelly.
Hi, Jenny.
Do you want to kind of give us like a little bit of background on your cousin, on what she was doing the night, the evening that she was killed?
Yeah, on March 24th in 1995, she was riding her bicycle home from the 4-H play practice. she stopped at Winch's, which is a local gas station in Vesper, Wisconsin. She bought 2 suckers and headed home on HH, heading north. And the eyewitness, Jim Verwink, supposedly seen a car coming from the south that struck her and killed her. I'm going to go into detail about that night between the reports that were taken from different deputies, investigators, and just go over the inconsistencies, discrepancies, and stuff in that.
Sure.
The eyewitness, Jim Verwink, gave that night 3 different descriptions of the car. By the officer reporting, Swayze, he described the car as a 4-door, possibly maroon or burgundy. Jim Verwink had to guess it was a Chevy Celebrity, and he also stated that he was confident about his guess because he works on cars often. A report taken by Thomas Reichert, Jim Verwink stated it was a two-tone General Motors product Celebrity, light in color, and then another report taken in by Starks said it was a 4-door GM, possibly a Cavalier, 2-tone, dark on top, silver gray on the bottom. Later on, down the road, in June of 95, Reichert did a follow-up of all the descriptions of the cars and stated that Jim had explained the car being burgundy and maroon in color, 4-door, possibly Celebrity again. But we have a question where Reichert, in the day of March 24th, Reichert took a statement from Jim saying that the car was 2-toned, GM Celebrity, and light in color. So there's 2 different stories or 2 different statements made there. And Thomas Reichert had put into the report. Now, why didn't he catch that when he was doing that follow-up report? Later on, the same night, Jim Verwink claims that he's seen, in one report, he claims that he's seen a vehicle strike Deidre south on HH. He's seen what he had believed to be an accident. Now, in another statement, he says he's seen reflectors of the bike and somewhat a cloud of dust go into the air. In another statement taken by Starks, he says he's seen a young girl riding a bike. Behind her came a vehicle with no headlights on. He believed Deidre noticed the vehicle, remembers her turning her head to look back, and then moving off to the edge for the vehicle. In another statement taken by Swayze, Jim Verwink stated he noticed the car heading northbound on County HH, hitting an unknown object. He saw what appeared to be dust and debris flying in the air, and he wasn't sure what the vehicle struck until he got closer and seen Deidre in the ditch. Now, after that, Jim Verwink claims that he went and pursued the car. We also got several different statements out of him as how that happened. From Stark's reporting, Jim stated briefly that he stopped at the scene. He seen Deidre in the ditch. He turned and pursued the vehicle. He was unable to catch up, so then he turned around and returned to the scene. Along the way, he stopped at his home and called 911. Another statement says, this is taken by Reichert, that Jim turned around in an adjacent driveway, took off after the vehicle. Prior to turning around, he said he beat his horn several times in the driveway to get help. At this time, Jim states he was driving a Plymouth Horizon. He also stated in that same report that the vehicle originally had its headlights on and then turned them off. In the same report at the end, Reichert also stated that one thing Jim stated was that he was sure that the vehicle had no lights on. In the area where Deidre had lain in the ditch, there was a lady who lived there was a house right there, and a lady lived in the house. And she was on a long-distance phone call during this whole time, and as she states, she heard a thud. She looked out the west side of her window, and she seen nothing, so she continued on the phone. She didn't know anything was going on until she heard the ambulance. That is when she got off her long-distance phone call and went outside and seen what was going on. We have documentation that she was on a long-distance phone call during that time. She also states that she never heard anybody honking. And
have they?
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jenny.
Have they asked about any of these all different statements have been made that they don't add up? Have they investigated the guy that's telling all this?
No. The investigation has been tainted and it's been sloppy. So, yeah, back to Jim chasing the car, calling 911, coming back to the scene. He also, at one time, being interviewed by the media, had stated that when he turned around, he seen an old man in the yard with a wheelbarrow and asked that old man to get help for Deidre before he chased off with the car, or to pursue the striking vehicle. So Jim chased the vehicle, goes back home, and calls 911. The 911 transcript from that night, the first thing that Jim says is, "I am just a witness." Mm-hmm. So he gets off the 911 call and he heads back to the scene. Now, mind you, when he's at home, whatever car he was in that he took off and chased this other vehicle with, he left at his home, as far as we know, and came back to the scene in a different vehicle. It was a tan Ford Taurus, and that vehicle ended up breaking down at the scene, and he had to get a ride back to his home from the deputies. Now, why did he change vehicles? Why wasn't it ever questioned what vehicle was he driving, and why wasn't it ever checked out?
My first question to him was why did you chase after the other car before you checked on Deidre? That should be your top priority.
That's what I would do. I have children of my own now. You know, that was my little sister, and if I would have seen a child get struck, I think I would have been aware enough of the situation, took a brief description of the vehicle, and my natural instinct I would stay with the child. I don't know why he left to chase the car. Well, he couldn't even positively ID it. 3 other people on that road ID'd it as a silver gray car, and he was the only one that didn't match up.
Yeah, he gave several different descriptions of the car that night. It's just all the discrepancies within the reports, and this is just a little bit of it. This was just that night, the first night. Yeah. This has been going on for 19 years, and the sheriff at that time, Brian Illingsworth, we know he has close friends at that time and still now to this day with Jim Verwink, the main suspect in the case. So there's a conflict of interest.
That's the chief of police?
That was the sheriff at the time in 1995.
Okay. Has anybody ever thought of sitting down and putting all the reports together and trying to come up with one description that sounds the most feasible?
Yes, we actually have somebody who did a 22-page case study. They had all the documents, and they studied them. It was for like over 600 hours, and then they wrote up this case study that was addressed to the Wood County DA, Wisconsin Attorney General, and Wisconsin DCI. 22 pages long. I can't get into it, but all of this stuff is posted on Deidre's Facebook page, Justice for Deidre. There's also the website www.justicefordeidre.com that has some reports on it also. Do you want to go into JoJo's and all that? Mm-hmm. The night that this happened, Jim Verwink's brother, Tom Verwink, and also Tom Verwink's friend, Roger Yenter, were seen at JoJo's Bar, which is right around the corner from County HH, where Deidre was hit. We got several different statements saying that Tom and Roger were there. Which would place them on County HH at the time that Deidre was hit. Now, Jim Verwink's whereabouts before this is that he was in the process of selling a car because both of these men own car dealerships in Wisconsin Rapids. So he was in the process of selling a car. He said he was meeting the Froms at Winch's gas station, and he had forgot a bumper. So he had to run back home to get the bumper and go back and meet them. So in this case study, this person who did this case study puts both of these brothers, Jim and Tom, on County HH at the same time as Deidre. It's just so much detail to go into within a short period of time.
I'd like to, take it over from here as Deidre's older brother. I was 13 years old at the time. I was watching my little brother Avery, who was 2, and it was a Friday night. I remember it was spring vacation or spring break, and from the day that happened to today, every day, I live with Deidre in spirit, and I just can't imagine doing something like this, getting away with it, and other people that are covering up for them. I mean, they're tied in with Wood County Sheriff's Department. If I wanted to list documents on supporting the last sheriff of Wood County, he had drug dependency problems. He went into rehab for several months. There is a lot. This should be a movie because it is unreal how much corruption there is in a little small.
No one got a tag off of the car?
No, apparently, supposedly Jim Verwink didn't ever get close enough to get a tag off the car.
But he is the car dealer, so you think he said he was confident in his ability to, identify cars, but he couldn't identify the car. He had 3 different varying descriptions, and there were 3 different witnesses on that road between their house and where Deidre was struck, which is 3.5 miles. All this took place within 5 miles from when Deidre left play practice and left the gas station to where she was hit was 2 miles away, and she was only less than a mile away from my parents' house.
About a quarter of a mile.
Quarter of a mile before she would have been home. And then just up that road, another 3.5 miles would be the Verwink's residence, and that would be TJ's Auto. That would be Tom and Jim Verwink. And it's they've been getting away with it, and they have ties. They think that they're untouchable, and they have to live every day with guilt. Whether they know who hit Deidre or they hit Deidre, they live with that every day.
Yeah.
And it's,
There's so many discrepancies within the case and so much information that point to them. They have ties, like we said, with the previous sheriff. Even with the main investigator at that time, Thomas Reichert, he is now the current sheriff. They even have ties with them. We have documents that state that the Verwinks gave monetary support to both Illingworth and Reichert's campaign. Also, the Wood County Sheriff's Department, the vehicles only get serviced at TJ's Auto. Why? when they get service for anybody else in Wisconsin Rapids, there's how many dealerships and shops?
Yeah.
It's not like this is a really small town where it's just one car shop. And it's been ever since we got in service.
Has anyone involved besides the local sheriff? I mean, have state police or the FBI or anybody like that been involved?
The DCI stepped in and did investigation, and nothing really ever came of that. They were just, there was no charges. Nothing was ever, it was just more interviews. But as far as when this happened, the sheriff was Brian Illingworth. And after all this went down and he went into rehab, and even his psychiatrist said that he's not getting better. They took his gun away, they took his badge away, and then he went to a desk job, and then he just kind of slid out the back door, whether they let him go or he quit, and then he went right to work for A Street Auto, which would be Jim Verwink.
Yeah.
And then at that time that Brian Illingsworth was admitted into a mental facility, there was actually Kurt Hoyer on the investigation, and he was the first one who actually was doing a good and thorough job on it, and that's when Illingsworth had his breakdown, and then all of a sudden Kurt Hoyer got pulled off of it, and he wasn't on the case anymore. At first, DCI, the request to get DCI involved was denied, and then Brian Illingsworth finally sent a letter to DCI, but in the letter to DCI, he downplayed the fact of the investigation, saying that the family was interrupting in the investigation.
That family being you guys.
Yes, the Week family. And that was another thing, too. There was eyewitnesses that lived right across from the Verwink residence, the TJ's Auto at the time. And their witness was they were watching a TV program, and they knew, between what time it was, because what TV program was.
6:30 every night.
6:30 every night it started. And they witnessed, they didn't have a description of the car, but there was two cars that came speeding in their driveway, their car dealership out of their personal or residence. There was shuffling of cars, moving around for a couple minutes. Two cars went north, and one car went south.
Which would have been Jim coming back to the scene.
Which would have been Jim. And their testimony meant nothing. They just looked right over that, thanks for that. But it's, you could tell right away there was somebody overseeing this investigation that was kind of telling the guys underneath, the investigators, that, hey, the Verwinks, they're clear. They didn't do anything, so just, take your statements and do your job. But in the back, they didn't do it.
They were pretty much trying to close the case that same night. And they didn't even interview the Tom Verwink and Ron Verwink, which is Jim Verwink's brothers, until after 11 o'clock at night. And the only reason why they went out there to interview him is because Jim called and said, hey, we're all over here at, was it Tom's house?
Yep,
at Jim's house. Why don't you come out and interview us? It was
4 hours later.
4 hours later, two deputies went out there to interview all three of them at the same time in the same room. So from the time that Jim Verwink got dropped off at his house, and from the time that they got out there, where in the hell were these guys during that time frame? What were they doing? Could they be hiding the car? Were they concocting up their story to make sure they all got the same story?
Yeah.
And that was another thing, too, when the DCI got involved, and it was, they interviewed, it would be Jim's wife, and they were starting to pin down the timeline, what happened that night. And she said that Tom Verwink got to her residence around 10 o'clock. Well, they called Wood County at 11 o'clock. So why did they need an hour to sit before they called? Was Tom Verwink really get there at 11, or was he there after he dropped his car off and sobered up?
Yeah,
you know, and then when the police came and took their statements, you know, like you said, they took it from 3 guys in one room, and then their vehicles outside, they didn't even do a documentation of the make, the model, if there was any damage. They just said, oh, the cars look good, you know, everything checks out. You know, so there was definitely some pressure, I guess, from the investigators, from the sheriff, to make sure that you don't ask too many hard questions on these guys.
Right. Well, Kelly and Brandon, we're going to take this opportunity to go to our halftime break, and we'll come back and we'll talk some more about Deidre Week.
Okay.
Thank you. I've never done that shit before. I think I'm just going
I won't be turned around. I'll keep this world from breaking me down. Stand back ground. And I won't back down.
Thank you, Deb, for that. And friends, we are here this evening talking to Kelly and Brandon about Deidre Week. Now, Kelly, you're Deidre's cousin, is that correct?
Yes.
And Brandon, you are her older brother.
Yep, I would be her older brother by 2 years.
By 2 years. They've been sharing with us the story of the night that Deidre was hit riding her bicycle home from a 4-H practice for a play, and how there have been so many different descriptions of the car, not only of the car, but whether the lights were on, whether the lights were off, whether the car was going north, whether the car was going south. And it's just, there's so many different stories that that the authorities have not even begun to try to clear up. From the way it sounds to me, they're just accepting everything at face value and saying, well, this is the way it is, and leave it to them. There will be no justice for Deidre. And that's why we're here this evening. You guys want to continue?
Yeah, I'd like to.
Sure. Okay.
I'd like to give my dad's story. My father was the one that found Deidre.
Okay.
That night that happened, I was babysitting my little brother. You know, he was 2 years old at the time, and we were upstairs, and Mom was at work. She works at the hospital, and Dad was outside feeding the dogs, and, you know, Deidre got done with play practice, and he was thinking, well, pretty soon she should be coming home. And, you know, he said he heard something and just thought it was a little strange, and he finished up feeding the dogs, and he got in his truck, and he started to pull out in the driveway. Well, as he was pulling out, 2 cars went by, and he didn't get a description of the cars because they're going by pretty fast, and this is within a quarter of a mile where Deidre would have been at the time. So he pulls out, he goes down the road, you know, less than a quarter of a mile, sees Deidre's bike laying on the road. And his first thoughts were, you know, she left her bike on the road, she went, saw some rabbits or some kittens or something in the field and was playing with them or chasing them. Well, then he noticed the damage to the rear tire to the bike, and he drove down. It was, I guess, 264 yards, about a city block and a half, and found Deidre lying in a ditch full of water. Now,
when he pulled out.
Yeah, and this is, you know, right when he found Deidre. So Jim Verwink, he already went by. So if he did stop and summon help, which he did not, he left her laying in a ditch of water. He wasn't concerned about her. So Dad found her, and like you said, the lady that was on the long distance phone call, her lights weren't on in the house. He couldn't see any lights, so he went to the next trailer and he summoned help and told them to call 911. And then
Brandon,
they came.
Brandon, can I ask you a question? Did they ever check for the bike to see if there had a different color paint on it from the vehicle that actually hit her?
I don't know. I know that they took samples from our barn, paint samples, trying to match up if there was the red scrapes from, because we kept our bikes in the barn. I don't think they followed up on that. And another discrepancy was that where my dad seen the bike and discovered Deidre and then summoned help and then went back to Deidre, and then he come home and told me and was calling everybody else. When they came back to the accident scene, somebody moved that bike. That bike, and they say, oh, well, he perceived that he wasn't under stress. No, at the time, he's seen the bike.
He's seen it twice in the same spot.
Yeah, he's seen it twice in the same spot because he had to turn around. He drove, seen the bike, found Deidre, got help. And then after staying with Deidre for a little bit, he turned around, drove back, and the bike was still in the same spot. And then he come home and told me, what was going on. And then when they went back to the accident scene, that bike was within, 10, 15 feet of Deidre? Like she just kind of tumbled off the bike. I don't know why the bike was moved, but there was reports of seeing somebody in a red pickup move the bike. Now, one of the brothers of Tom and Jim Verwink drove a red pickup at the time and lived in very close proximity to his brothers. And this is all coincidence or circumstantial, but there's a lot of questions that were never asked, were not asked in the right way, and we never got answers.
Another thing, too, is when David's father pulled out of his driveway to go look for Deidre, he seen the two cars fly by, and in the second car, he seen Jim Verwink in that car. So if David hadn't seen Jim, we think that Jim probably wouldn't have came back to the scene.
I have a question. Does that bike still exist? Do the police have it, or where's that bike at?
It is evidence, as far as we know.
Yeah, I think it should be in evidence. You would hope so.
I think they should check that bike for paint and see if they can match it to some of those vehicles. But then again, it's been a long time ago. Who knows if they can find the vehicles that were there that night?
That's just it. They're car dealers, and we live out in rural farmland. It's real easy for somebody to just chop up a car and scrap it, especially if you're an auto body shop.
Especially if you got something to hide.
Yeah, exactly.
There is so much detail and discrepancy in this case. We probably could have done a 2-hour show easily, but now this brings us to today, 19 years later, and we've started getting Deidre's story out there more. We have a petition going on right now calling for a John Doe investigation into the former sheriff, Brian Illingsworth, current sheriff, Thomas Reichert, to look more thoroughly into Deidre Weeks' case, along with other cases involved in Wood County. If we do get that John Doe, I think there will be a lot of cases that fall underneath that. Ever since we brought this back up, we've been hearing a lot of stuff on different cases that weren't thoroughly investigated, along with stories of corruption within the department. On this past Monday, on September 8th, we did a rally for truth in front of 8th Street Auto, which is a car dealership that Jim Verwink owns in Wisconsin Rapids. There was no more than 15, 20 people at one time. We were peaceful. We stayed off of private property. We stayed on the sidewalk. And there's pictures of this posted on Deidre's Facebook and everything. Shortly after we had gotten there, they had pulled up a black diesel pickup truck towards the front where we were at, and they ran that pickup truck for 6 hours trying to, fumigate us out of there. Eventually, they ended up pulling out this other vehicle, doing hot laps around their parking lot, and trying to smoke us out with that. Now, if you were innocent and you didn't have anything to hide, why would you want to chase us out there? Why wouldn't you come stand with us, and why wouldn't you sign a petition?
And Kelly, I would like to tell you, if we don't get everything out tonight, PM me and we can set another date up to finish it. Or we can even,
that.
Yes, we can do that.
There's much more to the case, and with everything going on right now, too, we could definitely do another couple hours. So right now we got the petition going on. This coming Monday, we are going to be out in front of the Wood County Courthouse from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. doing a rally for the John Doe. At 4 p.m. on Monday, we meet with Craig Lambert to ask for the John Doe and sign or hand in all the signatures from the petition. Right now online, just before the radio show started, we hit our goal of over 2,000 signatures. And that's just online. That doesn't include our paper signatures. But we are hoping that they are listening right now. And some questions, the local Tribune went and did an article on the petition going, and Thomas Reichert played it off that it was a political stunt because in November, that is when we have elections for sheriff again, and we do not want him for sheriff again because he's not doing his job. Right. But if he is listening, we want to ask, why are Wood County vehicles only serviced out at TJ's Auto?
Right.
And
like you said, when you had that rally out in front of the building, right in front of their
lot, did not like that.
You would think that if they didn't have
their name,
they would have been out there supporting you instead of trying to cause all this ruckus to run you out.
Exactly. And there's several videos out there of that on her page and throughout YouTube.
And that was just after, that weekend after Deidre's, I don't call it an accident because this was not an accident. Somebody purposely left her there. Whether it was an accident initially, they did not care about her at all. But after that weekend, they started a reward fund to find out who did this to Deidre Week. Well, once we started talking to the neighbors, and all the neighbors were saying, no, we seen, 2 cars pulled in there, and everything just, it wasn't matching up, for my mom and dad. And weeks later, after we started putting some pressure on, well, what about Jim Verwink? His story doesn't add up. They pulled their reward money, $500 or whatever their dirty money was. They pulled it, and Brian Illingworth, the sheriff of Wood County at the time, come out, and I was a witness for this because the rest of the year I didn't go to school, and I remember being on the porch, and Brian Illingworth leaning, it was almost like he wanted my dad to punch him. He got right in my dad's face and says, where's your compassion for the Verwinks? And Dad looked at him, and he just walked by. Now, I don't know why he would say that. Why is he so worried about the Verwinks?
Yeah.
That's really weird why you would be attacking somebody that just lost their daughter and you're not doing your job.
Yeah.
And he's the one, that went into the mental institution a couple years later when they started closing in. The DCI stepped in and started closing in. He was in, I think for like 4 or 5 months he was in rehab. And then they said something about he had a bomb and was going to, there's witnesses saying that he heard him say he would want to shoot Dave Weeks' head off. And it's not he should not be sheriff. And he was also the narcotics officer, and there's a connection between the Verwinks and the narcotics officer and drug trafficking. Jim Verwink got busted up on the northern peninsula or the northern part of Wisconsin, busted for cocaine, whatever, right? Well, what does he do? Yeah. He gets caught, and then he runs out of the cop car. So, I mean, there's many other...
And there's other hit and runs that have not been, they've not been charged with, or the charges have been lowered or dismissed. So we need this Doe. We were promised the John Doe. I'm sorry?
Do you know how many other hit and runs there are?
We know of 2 for sure. But no, we were promised the John Doe investigation by Greg Potter before the statute of limitations for the hit and run ended, which was 6 years, but we never got that. This case is still open, and it's open as a vehicular homicide. There is no statute of limitations for that.
Okay.
So yeah, it's just a matter. We could do a whole another couple hours on this. We probably will have to reschedule another show.
Okay.
But right now we're working on getting that John Doe investigation, and if anybody out there can go and like her page, share her story, sign the petition, and just stay on her page and keep updated because we're not going away.
We've waited 19 years. We let the law enforcement do what they're supposed to do, and right from the start we could tell that they were covering something up. They were not wanting us to find out answers because they would be held accountable because they did not do the right thing, and now 19 years later, the shit's piling up, and it's just more and more people that are getting involved with bad things, and it's all coming down. They can't, there's no honor among thieves.
Their time is out.
So what we're asking tonight, friends, if you live in this area or were in that area 19 years ago, if you saw anything about Deidre Week and the hit and run on her bicycle that evening on Route HH, if you saw anything whatsoever, please pass the information along to Kelly. Do you have a number that they could call?
You can send a message to Facebook because we can't trust Wood County right now.
Okay. If you have any information, send it to either to them through their Facebook, or you can send it to us through M&M Group Mail, and we will make sure that Kelly and Brandon get it. And let's see if we can't bring some justice for Deidre after these 19 long years that they've been waiting and searching.
Thank you so much, Jenny and Jerry, for having us tonight. We really appreciate this.
Thank you guys a lot. It really helps, especially with social media now.
Well, yeah,
really brought
you guys got about 6 more minutes or 7 more minutes that you can talk about her and tell us a little bit more if you have it.
Right?
Oh, yeah. We have plenty.
A couple weeks afterwards, we were getting harassing phone calls. So Wood County tapped our phone. We're getting letters in the mail. Wood County tapped our phone. Well, it comes out that one of those calls came from the Jim Verwink's residence. Now, there should have been civil litigation. Somebody should have let us know that, hey, they can't do that. That would be a clear thing. Why are they leaving prank calls and calling the weeks? That's weird too. They don't, and they said they're going to get together and bring all their cousins from Minnesota and meet at the courthouse and deal with the weeks. And then Jim Verwink, about 2 or 3 months later, he took a polygraph test. Now, this polygraph test was administered by Laverne Rigel, and what it was Laverne Rigel was given a whole stack of...
No, he wasn't even given any papers.
No.
Tom Reichert met with him and discussed the case details. The examiner said, he stated in the report that there was no possible way that he could go through all the statements because there was so much.
And what it said right in the polygraph was that he had a very low response, which means that he would be very confident in his answers. Well, also, if you have a buddy that works in the police department for the Wood County, he also knows how to work a polygraph. Now, it could be, say, he could take a prescription drug that just zonks him out, and anything you say to him, he would have no response. The only thing that did show up just a little bit was when they asked him, do you know who did this to Deidre? And there was just a little bump. But this polygraph, it wasn't like we wanted it. He was the one, Jim Verwink was the one that said, I want a polygraph. So it's almost like he was pushing it because he knew it was set up. He knew he would pass it. And then
prepare for it.
And then he could say, look, I'm clear. You guys ain't got nothing on me. Let's give a polygraph to Tom Verwink. Let's give a polygraph to Roger Yunter.
Another thing is in the report from the examiner, he states in there that Jim Verwink asked for the polygraph to clear his name. Now, when Thomas Reichert went and made a report about the polygraph, Tom Reichert stated that Wood County Sheriff's Department requested the polygraph. So what is it? Who asked for it? It's all...
Yeah, there's a lot of coincidental stuff, just like statute of limitations for vehicular homicide is 6 years in Wisconsin. Tom Verwink, who we think was at least in the striking vehicle with Roger Yunter, Tom Verwink got married 6 years and 1 week after Deidre's accident.
So that would have been a week after that 6-year statute of limitations was up.
So that might have been a coincidence, or he might have been telling his wife, hey, I'll get married, but, I got to make sure I'm not in jail. So, there's a lot of shadiness. There's a lot of ties between the law enforcement and the Verwinks.
It sounds like a real big mess.
And it's, not just the county. It goes up to the state. There's a lot of people that want to keep this quiet because they got their hands caught in it, and now they're gonna be associated with that.
The Verwinks have a sister in the Wisconsin State Assembly, and Jim Verwink's son is the mayor of Wisconsin Rapids. So they have a lot of connections within political and within the law enforcement. And, with the law enforcement, it's just not deputies and sheriffs. It goes into the judges and everything else.
And I just feel so bad for my parents and what they've went through. You know, you expect the law to do their job, to serve and protect, and they just totally disregarded Deidre's life like it meant nothing.
Right.
I mean, that is so sickening that, you know, I'm a veteran, I served, and, you know, this is not America. This is not what they should be doing. You know, somebody needs to be held accountable, and they will. You know, whether it's everybody meets their judgment day, they have to live with that guilt every day.
It's not what the foundation of this country is. And Brandon, we thank you for your service to the country. And it's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yep.
And all we're asking for is justice for the death of a young girl who, barely beginning life, at the age of 11, riding her bicycle home one evening and was hit by a hit-and-run driver. And all we're asking for is justice for Deidre Week. Jenny, do you have anything you want to say before I go to prayer? Okay.
Just Kelly, you just get in touch with me if you want to do a second show.
I will, Jenny. We will for sure. And thank you for having us. Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. Happy birthday.
Thank you, sweetie. Thank you.
Thank you guys for being with us. Let's join together in a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for your grace and the promises that you lay before us in your word. And Lord, tonight we want to lift to you Deidre. And Lord, you know what happened that night. You saw what happened that night. You are everywhere. You are all seeing and all knowing. And Lord, we just pray that you would allow the conscience of this person to be annoyed so much that they cannot stand to keep it in to themselves any longer. And Lord, that they would go to the proper authorities and release to them what happened that night, and that they would be held accountable for this young girl's life. And Lord, we pray this not just for Deidre tonight, but for all of those, Lord, who have lost their lives and are still searching for justice for what has happened to them. And Lord, that you would just strengthen the families and encourage them as they search for that justice. We think of Kelly and Brandon tonight, Lord, that they've gone 19 years, and this whole family, Lord, gone 19 years just searching for the answers to what happened that night on that lonely road. So, Lord, we just lift it all up to you tonight. We ask that you would be with all of the missing tonight, Lord, that you would just encourage them to be patient, that you would encourage them to keep their eyes open for any opportunity they might have to be able to return home to their families. And Lord, that you just give those families the patience that they need and the encouragement to continue to keep searching and keep looking for their loved ones so that one day they can say they're coming home. And Father, tonight we just want to lift to you all of the needs of the world. We think of the situation overseas, Lord, in Iraq and Syria and Israel. And Father, pray that you would be with our soldiers that are over there and be with our soldiers here who are preparing to go that way. And Lord, tonight we just lift all of these things to you through your word, and we stand on the promise that if we leave them at your throne, we will find answers. So Lord, we do that tonight through the precious name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Amen. Thank you all for being with us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and just get in touch with us, and y'all have a good night.
Okay,
And
thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
And thank you to our listeners for being with us tonight, too. And we look forward to sharing with you again next week. Good night, everyone.
I'm coming home.